Hey, it's Kyle here, and today I'll be reviewing Childhood's End by Arthur C Clarke. So until I read this book, I'd never read anything by Arthur C Clarke. Obviously, he's a legendary figure in sci-fi for mainly 2001 Space Odyssey. Amazing movie. I've never actually read the book, but I've heard the name Arthur C Clarke a lot, and that he's definitely one of those very influential figures in sci-fi that really helped influence what sci-fi is today. But I never read one of these books, and actually I wasn't really intending to pick up this book. I was at the bookstore and I was kind of looking for a couple sci-fi books to read, some standalone stuff, and I was kind of looking actually for see if there's any Isaac Asimov or Ray Bradbury stuff that I haven't read before in my local bookstore. So I was checking that out, and they didn't happen to have anything for either of those authors that I hadn't read at the moment. But then, as I was just scanning the shelves they were on, obviously, Asimov A, Bradbury B, right next to that was the C. So I was like, oh, there's Arthur C Clarke, there's a couple of books. Like, oh, Childhood's End, let me see what that is. I looked at that course, like, that sounds interesting. I've never read one of these books, maybe this is a good time to try it out. As you can see, it's a very short book, so if even if I'm not into it, it's not a big deal. It's not like I'm committing to read like an 800-page novel or something like that. It's a very short novel, so I decided now's a good time to give a try of this legendary sci-fi writer. So what were my thoughts on Childhood's End? Overall, I like the concept and the premise of the book. The setting's really cool. A lot of the philosophy and thoughts explored through this book is very, very interesting, which I think is very true if you've ever seen Space Odyssey. It's one of those movies that has a lot of cool concepts. You're like, wow, this is wild to think about. This is a really cool thought experiment. But a lot like Space Odyssey, I like Childhood, and also there's not really a whole lot of character development. The book is more about these concepts and what is happening to humanity versus following character A and seeing how that character develops over the course of time, which is very true for Space Odyssey. If you've ever watched that classic movie, how the characters are developing is not the most important part of that story. I think it's telling probably the most famous character from Space Odyssey is an AI computer program called HAL. It's not any of the humans. It's more the computer that becomes the star character of that story. For Childhood's End, I would take some very similar influences of Space Odyssey. It's humanity kind of beginning to explore space, and then basically coming in contact with something else that kind of maybe spurs along humans' journey through evolution. In this case, this book is kind of set, at least the start of it, in the 20th century. It's during the Cold War, Soviet Union, United States still around, and just one day these massive spaceships show up and kind of settle over all the major cities in the world. They stay there for a little bit. Everybody doesn't know what's going on. They don't communicate, and then suddenly they communicate, and they basically establish that we're now in charge. Y'all can still live your life. Most things you can do exactly how you're doing, but there's a few things you can't do. Like, we're not going to tolerate war and stuff like that. Violence, crime is no longer tolerated. You cannot hunt animals for sport and stuff like that. But for the most part, there's you can just live however. If you want to be a democracy, you can be a democracy. If you want to be an absolute monarchy, you can be absolute monarchy. If you want to be, a liberal democracy or whatever type of government society you want to be in, that's cool. As long as you don't break these basic rules, everything's good. And so that's where the book starts. And so really the story picks up a couple years after the aliens have first appeared, and we're getting basically two different factions on Earth. The main faction, who is very supportive of the aliens, which the humans have begun to term the overlords, even though the aliens themselves have not given themselves a title, because they're thankful for basically bringing humanity into this new golden age. War's over, crime's over, society's much more stable, everything seems to be improving. But the other faction is yeah, but why are they doing this? We've lost all free will. This is not our choice. And we're basically giving all our power over to them. They can do anything they want to us. What if their intentions are bad? And so that's kind of the first part of the book. You kind of explore that. And I should say one thing I didn't mention. The aliens never appear in person to any humanity. They just communicate by like voice recordings and stuff like that. The only person they speak to directly, kind of one-on-one conversations, is the United Nations Secretary General. And even him, he doesn't see them. It's like in a conference room, and they kind of speak to him over an intercom. And this is a part of the tension, is like, they don't trust us even to see that. We don't even know who they are. What is this? And basically they kind of explain at one point, which is, I think, to me, one of the more interesting parts of the novel. You're not ready to see us yet, but you'll be ready in 50 years. Just wait 50 years and then you'll see us. So a lot of cool, interesting things are explored in the first phase of the book. I think a lot about free will. What are people willing to give up for a better society? Is it worth it or not? I think the great thing about this book, it's up to you to decide like which faction is right. It's never really settled on like, oh, this side was clearly right, this side was clearly wrong. It's up to each side to kind of like, what is the most important to you? And that's the side you're going to kind of gravitate towards in the debate. Second phase of the book skips ahead 50 years when the overlords are ready to finally appear to humanity. And humanity at this point has been completely transformed. There's really no longer countries anymore. Human society has been completely remade by the overlords, and it's very much alluded to like this is humanity's golden age. Almost all work is now done by automation, so humanity, like money really doesn't mean anything much anymore. So humanity, you're basically able to do anything you want to. If you want to go to college for 10, 20 years and just study, you can. If you're really into animals, you can just be a veterinarian and not worry about like, does I not pay my bills? Or you can be an artist, a painter, a philosopher, just whatever you want. And it's kind of this intellectual flourishing of humanity because you don't have to worry about paying the bills and finding a job. It's just more about expanding your knowledge and doing every way you want to. When the overlords finally reveal themselves to humanity, what they look like, it is a very shocking moment. The entire first half of the book, you're kind of guessing, who are these aliens? What do they look like? Are they actually living beings? Are they AI? Are they a robot? What is this big reveal going to be? It is very fascinating when it does happen. I don't want to spoil any of that, so I won't mention what it is. But the entire phase of that book kind of revolves around humanity's reaction and how they've adapted to this new reality that the overlords have imposed on world. And kind of, at some point, you're beginning to get the frustrations of like, yes, this is intellectual exploration that we're able to do, but we're still limited by the overlords. We have to follow all the rules. We can't explore space, for example. They're limiting with us, and it's kind of big again, like, what are you willing to give up and what is really needed for a species to flourish? Phase 3, I don't want to get a whole lot into, but it kind of wraps up the overlord's mission on Earth and what they're all about. And so the entire book, you want to know, what is this? Do they have good intentions? Do they have bad intentions? What is going to happen here? And it is very interesting. I think a lot like 2001 Space Odyssey, I think people are going to read this book and the conclusion's like, that was not satisfying. Other people are like, oh, that's an interesting concept, but okay. And other people are like, well, this is mind-blowing. I absolutely love this. So again, I think this book is more about exploring concepts related to humanity, not necessarily character development, a story plot, very much like Space Odyssey. So if you love 2001 Space Odyssey, I think this is a book you're going to really like a lot. If you've seen 2001 Space Odyssey and you're like, I don't get why people like this movie, this is awful, this was boring, I don't get it, I'm confused, you're probably not going to like this book. But I'd say Arthur C Clarke is one of those people, if you're really into sci-fi, you probably need to read at least one of his books because he is one of the more influential figures in the history of sci-fi. So I'm glad I finally checked him off my author list and I've read it. I enjoyed the book somewhat. I don't like as much as works by like Isaac Asimov, for example. So not quite my cup of tea, but overall, very interesting read, and I'm glad I read it. So those are my thoughts on Childhood's End by Arthur C Clarke. Let me know if you've read any of his books in the comments below and what has been your reaction to the works of Arthur C Clarke. Hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, hit the like button. If you have that, please subscribe to the channel. I appreciate the support. Thanks for watching. I'll see you the next time, and happy reading.